Valentine's Day, a time for love, romance, and apparently for terror too. I had been dating my girlfriend, Nikki, for 3 years. It all started with a simple Instagram comment, followed by some casual chatting, then exchanging numbers. Within a week, we met in person, and by January, we were already spending a lot of time together. It felt good knowing I wouldn't be alone on Valentine's Day that year. But what I didn't realize was that someone else had his eyes on Nikki too. Someone who wasn't willing to let go. His name was Ben. Nikki told me about him one night, just a few weeks after we started dating. He was an older guy from her commuter college, someone she met in a group project. At first, he was just annoying, following her around, trying to insert himself into her conversations, sending way too many texts. But then it got worse. He found out where she lived. She started getting creepy, obsessive messages at all hours. "Why won't you talk to me? I miss you. You're mine." And then a box of chocolates appeared on her doorstep. "I hope you like the gift I left you." That's when Nikki finally snapped. She texted him back, one long final message telling him to leave her alone. She even mentioned that she was seeing someone now. Mr. Ben didn't take it well. A few days later, Nikki sent me a screenshot. A new, unknown number had messaged her. "Is your boyfriend's name my name?" That sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't just stalking Nikki. He was now watching me. I told her that if he contacted her one more time, we'd go to the police. Fast forward to Valentine's Day. We had a dinner reservation at a restaurant by the water. The night was perfect. Good food, laughter, and for the first time in weeks, Nikki seemed at ease. But then, we saw him. A man sat alone on a bench near the parking lot, hat pulled down, face shadowed. Nikki whispered, "What if that's Ben?" We both laughed until he slightly turned his head toward us. Then he quickly looked away. Seconds later, he got up and walked off. A coincidence? Maybe, but my gut told me otherwise. At this point, let me ask you all something. If you were in my shoes and you saw a guy possibly stalking you and your girlfriend at a restaurant, what would you do? Would you confront him? Call the police right then and there? Or just ignore it and hope it's nothing? Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear your thoughts. All right, back to the story. After dinner, we went back to my place. We were on the couch, getting comfortable when Nikki suddenly pulled away. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, a noise. From outside, something had moved in the backyard. I grabbed my phone, slipped on my slides, and stepped outside, expecting to see a stray animal. But then I saw it. The stack of beach chairs leaning against the house had been knocked over. But there was no wind, no animals. Then I noticed something. In the bushes, a shape, tall, still, watching. My heart slammed against my ribs. I squinted, stepping forward slowly. And then it moved. I barely had time to react before a figure lunged from the bushes, rushing toward me. I didn't think, I just acted. I tackled him before he could get fully loose from the branches, pinning him to the ground. "Nikki, call the police!" I shouted. He thrashed, tried to break free, but I held him down. And then Nikki stepped outside, phone in hand. She gasped, "Oh my God, it's him!" Ben. The police arrived within minutes. They cuffed him, searched his pockets, and found a knife. Yeah, a knife. Nikki showed the officers all the messages, the gifts, the fake numbers. That was enough for her to press charges for stalking and harassment. Ben ended up with a misdemeanor and a restraining order. If he ever contacted Nikki again, he'd be arrested immediately. And since that night, he hasn't. But sometimes, even now, I can't help but wonder, was he really just planning to watch us that night? Or was he going to do something far worse? What do you think? If you made it this far, let me know in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? Have you ever dealt with something like this? And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more terrifying tales. Stay safe out there, because you never know who's watching. Dating in this era is weird. You can meet hundreds of people without ever leaving your house. But does that make it safer? Or does it make it easier for someone to watch you without you even realizing? As a bartender in San Diego, I meet all kinds of people. Some are great, some are questionable, but something about online dating always made me uneasy. Maybe it was the illusion of control, the way you can swipe left, ghost someone, or assume you know them based on a few carefully curated photos. But after my last relationship fizzled out, I decided to give it another shot. His name was Jason. At least, that's what he told me. Jason was attractive, well-spoken in texts, normal. And let me tell you, on dating apps, normal is rare. We matched on a Monday. By Wednesday, we were talking constantly. He asked me about my favorite bars, my dog, even what my ideal Valentine's Day looked like. Innocent, right? But the more we talked, the more off it felt. His messages came too fast, like he was always waiting for me to reply. He asked specific questions about my schedule, when I worked, when I got off, where I liked to go after a shift. At first, I brushed it off. Just casual conversation, right? Then came the possessiveness. I bet you get hit on all the time at work. Must be exhausting. I laughed it off. Yeah, comes with the job. But you don't give those guys attention, right? Red flag. I didn't respond right away. My gut was already telling me something was wrong. Then another message popped up. I just don't want you around creeps. That was it. My instincts screamed at me to cut him off. So I did. I unmatched him and moved on. I thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. Now let's pause here for a second. Imagine you're in my shoes. You've just cut off contact with a guy who's acting a little too intense, and suddenly, weird things start happening. Would you? A. Ignore it and hope it's a coincidence. B. Lock down your social media, change your number, and go into full panic mode. Let me know in the comments, because trust me, what happened next made me wish I had done more. A few days later, I noticed a new follower on Instagram. No profile picture, no posts, just a blank account. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice, but something about the timing unsettled me. I blocked the account. Then on Valentine's Day, I got a text from an unknown number. Look outside. At first, I thought it was a prank. Spam. Then another message popped up. Happy Valentine's Day, beautiful. My stomach tightened. I didn't recognize the number, but somehow I knew exactly who it was. My fingers hovered over my phone, and before I could type a response, another text came through. That dress looks good on you. I froze. I was wearing a dress that night at work. Right then, I whipped my head toward the entrance, scanning the customers, couples, regulars, no one unusual. My heart pounded. Then, another text. Smile for me. I didn't. Instead, I ducked behind the bar, pretending to check something on the bottom shelf. My hands shook. I showed the messages to my coworker, Lisa. Her face darkened. You sure it's him? Who else could it be? Lisa's expression turned serious. You need to be careful. That's when it hit me. My social media. I had been careless. My Instagram was public. Pictures of my dog at the park, drinks at my favorite bar, selfies in front of my apartment building. And the worst part, a photo from that very morning. Me, in this exact dress, captioned, Valentine's shift. Come grab a drink. He had followed the trail I left online. And now, he was here. My shift ended at midnight. Lisa insisted on walking me to my car. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few scattered vehicles. My car was parked near the back, where the security lights didn't quite reach. As we got closer, Lisa stiffened. Is that someone by your car? I followed her gaze. My stomach dropped. A shadow stood next to my driver's side door, unmoving. I sucked in a breath. The figure shifted slightly, just enough for me to see a faint smirk in the dim streetlight. Jason. Lisa grabbed my arm. We're not going to your car. We turned and power walked back to the bar. I refused to look back, but I could feel him watching. Lisa locked the door the second we stepped inside. We're calling the cops. By the time they arrived, Jason was gone. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Over the next few days, I noticed things. A strange car parked near my building. A shadow at the end of my street. A bouquet of red roses left outside my door. No note, no sender. Just waiting. The texts continued. Random numbers. Why won't you talk to me? You can't ignore me forever. I blocked every number, but they kept coming. Lisa had me stay at her place. Even with someone around, I felt watched. Then one night, the messages stopped. And that terrified me more than anything. Had he moved on? Or was he just waiting for me to let my guard down? I wasn't taking any chances. Lisa and I moved. New place, security system, a fresh start. But even now I hesitate before posting online. Even now, I scan the streets. Because the truth is, the scariest people aren't the ones lurking in dark alleys. They're the ones who already know exactly where you live. If this story made you rethink your Valentine's Day plans, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder to stay safe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had an online dating experience that took a dark turn? I'm dying to hear it. Stay safe, trust your instincts. Because sometimes, love isn't sweet. Sometimes, it's terrifying. You ever meet someone who just wasn't right? Someone who seemed normal at first, but deep down felt completely wrong? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. And I barely made it out. Fall 2018. I was doing online classes at a well-known college, but I knew I'd transfer to a university in my hometown by winter. I still wanted to make friends, maybe even meet someone special. That's how I found her. Her name was Alex. We met on Tinder. She was cool, funny, and we had a lot in common. Shoulder-length blonde hair, cute glasses, bright blue eyes. She wasn't from my hometown, which didn't bother me at first. But when she returned from Thanksgiving break, something was different. She changed. Her sarcasm turned mean. Her playful teasing became outright aggressive. There was no physical harm yet, but the way she spoke to me felt off. I brushed it off as stress, finals, holidays, all that. Then winter break came, and she went back home. We kept in touch through texts, Snapchats, the occasional FaceTime, but something told me she wasn't the same person I met. I should have listened to my gut. Fast forward a few months. It's early February. The breakup was mutual. She was homesick, struggling to adjust, and I understood. A clean break, no hard feelings. But as Valentine's Day approached, I felt lonely. My friends all had plans, and I didn't want to spend the night alone. So I reactivated my Tinder. That's when Shambi showed up, Alex, again. She matched with me almost instantly. Same bright blue eyes, same cute glasses, same flirty messages, like nothing had ever happened. I hesitated. My gut told me something wasn't right, but I ignored it. We made plans for Valentine's night. Dinner, a movie, a walk around town. It felt normal, like old times. The tension from before, gone. She was sweet, affectionate, perfect. But that night, she wasn't perfect. She was something else entirely. She came back to my apartment. We had a good time. She even asked to stay over since it was snowing and her place was a 10-minute walk away. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to her getting out of bed. She moved towards the bathroom, turned on the light, and shut the door. No big deal, right? I fell back asleep. But at 5:30 a.m., I woke up again. And this time, something was very wrong. The bathroom light was off. The apartment was silent. But Alex, she wasn't in bed. I sat up, grabbed my phone. No messages, no calls, nothing. But her clothes? They were still on the floor. That meant she was still here. Then I heard it. A soft creak from the other side of the room. I turned and saw her. She was standing in the corner of my bedroom, completely still, facing the wall. My heart dropped. "Alex," I whispered. No response. I turned on my bedside lamp, just enough light to see. My stomach twisted. She wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, just standing there. I slowly got out of bed, walked toward her. Every step felt like a mistake. I reached out, gently placed my hand on her shoulder. "Alex." Silence. Then in an instant, she spun around at an inhuman speed. Her eyes were hollow. Her face was blank. And then she screamed. Not a normal scream. It was a blood-curdling, inhuman wail. She lunged at me, clawed at me, hit me. I stumbled back, falling onto the bed. My body screamed to run, but I was frozen. She kept screaming with no emotion on her face. Then as suddenly as it started, she stopped. Without a word, she ran, grabbed her clothes, bolted out the door. I barely had time to react. I ran to the door, saw it wide open, looked down the hall. She was gone. But the nightmare wasn't over. Then I smelled it, a putrid, rotting stench. It was coming from the bathroom. I reached for the door handle, hesitated. Something in me screamed, "Don't open it," but I did. The sight made my stomach turn. The shower curtain, torn down. My medicine bag, emptied. Bottles shattered on the floor. The floor, soaking wet. And then, the worst part. She'd smeared feces all over the bathroom mirror. The sight made me gag. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and called the police. They arrived quickly, asked for her Tinder and Snapchat profiles. But guess what? They were gone, deleted. I only had one picture of her. A Snapchat selfie I had saved, but it had a filter, distorting her features. The police filed a report, but couldn't do much else. They advised me to have someone stay with me that night, just in case. I called my best friend, Rob. He was in the same major as Alex and had classes with her. Or so I thought. I showed him the picture, asked if he knew her. He frowned. I've never seen this girl before. My stomach twisted. That night, Rob stayed over. We locked every door, every window, watched a movie to distract ourselves. At 3 a.m. I woke up. Something was outside my apartment door. The doorknob twisted, slowly, carefully. Whoever it was, they didn't knock, didn't say a word, just tried to get in. For a full minute, they kept trying. Then, silence. I crept toward the peephole, barely breathing, looked outside. Nothing. To this day, I don't know who or what Alex really was. But here's my question for you. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done differently? Would you have followed your gut and avoided her? Or stayed, like I did, and faced the consequences? Let me know in the comments. And if you ever meet someone who seems off, trust your instincts. I should have said no. When my coworker Danny first suggested setting me up with her amazing friend, I laughed it off. Blind dates weren't my thing, and Valentine's Day was the last day I wanted to spend awkwardly getting to know a stranger. But Danny was relentless. She's funny, she's smart, and she's gorgeous, she insisted, nudging my arm. Come on, man, one dinner. Worst case, you get a weird story. She had a point. And after a long shift watching couples clink glasses over overpriced steaks, I figured, why not? That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, not asking for more details. The restaurant was a cozy Italian spot in River North, dimly lit, filled with the scent of garlic and fresh bread. Nice, but not too fancy. I got there early, texting Danny that I was on board with this ridiculous setup. Then she walked in, Maya. She was beautiful, in a sharp, almost calculated way. High cheekbones, dark hair, pulled into a sleek ponytail, red lipstick that matched her dress. She smiled, and for a moment I thought, maybe this won't be so bad. We ordered drinks, and the conversation flowed. She was easy to talk to, laughed at my jokes, asked about my job. I told her about working as a server, my weirdest customer interactions, the usual small talk. Then things got weird. You must be exhausted, she said, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. After last night, closing that late, I blinked. How do you know I closed? She giggled. Danny mentioned it. That made sense, but something about the way she said it, so casually, rubbed me the wrong way. I shrugged it off and asked about her job. She worked in marketing. Or at least that's what she claimed. Her answers were vague, like she was dodging something. Then the conversation turned to family. I mentioned my younger brother, how he'd just started college. Oh, at Loyola, right? My stomach tightened. I hadn't mentioned the school. Yeah, I said slowly. How'd you know that? She tilted her head, smiling. You posted about it. That picture at his dorm move-in, so cute. That picture had been buried in my feed for months. Something was off. I glanced at my phone, debating an excuse to leave. Then she mentioned my favorite coffee shop, describing my exact order with eerie precision. I laughed nervously. Lucky guess. She leaned forward. I've seen you there a lot. That sent a chill through me. I'd never noticed her before. But she described where I usually sat, how I fidgeted with my phone while waiting. Then she mentioned my apartment building. The route. I walked home after work. The laundromat I used. I felt sick. This wasn't normal. I tried to change the subject, but she just smiled. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, You think you're hard to follow? You're not. That was it. I needed to leave. The waiter came by, asking if we wanted another round. I shook my head and stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I should get going. Early shift tomorrow. Maya didn't react. She just sighed. I knew you'd try to run. I nearly knocked into the waiter as I backed away. What? She stood, slowly, smoothed her dress. You always leave places early, always take the long way home. How long had she been watching me? She just tilted her head. You're overthinking this. I turned and bolted. Outside, the street was buzzing with people. But I felt exposed, like someone was watching me. I texted Danny immediately. Me. Who the hell is Maya? Danny. What do you mean? She said you guys were hitting it off. Me number. She knows things about me. Personal things. Danny. That's weird. But maybe she just saw stuff online? I wanted to believe that. I really did. Then a notification. Unknown number. Running doesn't help. You know that. My mouth went dry. I scanned the sidewalk. No sign of her. No sign of anyone watching. I ran home, locking my door the second I got inside. What would you do if you were in my situation? Would you call the cops? Confront her? Change your number? Or would you do something else? Comment below. Because trust me, this is far from over. The messages kept coming. At first they were harmless. You left so fast. I wasn't done talking. Then, you always take 8th Street home. But not tonight. Smart. And then, I'll see you soon. I blocked the number, switched up my routine, started going to a different coffee shop. I thought that was enough. Until Danny pulled me aside at work. She came in again, she whispered. Asked where you were. Danny told her I had the night off. Maya just smiled, like she already knew. That night, no texts, no calls. A few days passed, then a week. I let my guard down. Big mistake. One night, after a late shift, I was walking home when I saw her. Standing outside my apartment building. She wasn't facing me. She was staring up at my window, my stomach twisted into knots. I wanted to turn back, but I was too close. She had to have seen me. I gritted my teeth and walked past, pretending I didn't recognize her. She didn't move, not when I unlocked the door, not when I bolted upstairs, not even when I pressed myself against my door, waiting, listening, nothing. The next morning she was gone, but 2 nights later, my phone buzzed. Airdrop request. 1 photo. I didn't recognize the name. I swiped it away. Another popped up. 1 photo. Then another and another. I turned off my phone and lay there in the dark, barely breathing. A week later, Danny called. Maya wasn't her friend. She had been a regular at the restaurant. The kind you never notice. She had asked Danny to set us up after weeks of watching me. Then Danny did some digging. Maya had done this before. She had stalked another guy. When he rejected her, she vandalized his car, left notes on his doorstep. It got so bad, he moved across the country. I went to the police. They took my statement, but a restraining order? That wouldn't stop someone like her. So I did the only thing I could. I changed everything, deleted my social media, took different routes home, and I never agreed to a blind date again. I never saw her after that, but sometimes, in a passing reflection, I swear I see her, just for a second. Valentine's Day was never really my thing. Elena knew this, but she loved it, so I always made the effort. Fancy dinner, candles, the whole thing. This year, we picked a waterfront restaurant in Miami, a place known for its seafood and live jazz. The atmosphere was perfect. Couples clinked champagne glasses, waiters weaved through the tables, and the rich scent of garlic butter and grilled fish filled the air. But from the moment we sat down, something felt off. At first, I couldn't explain it, just a gnawing unease like being watched. The restaurant was packed, but the weight of unseen eyes pressed against me. Then I spotted him. A man sat alone at a table near the back, mid-50s, balding, wearing a black suit that didn't quite fit, too tight at the shoulders like it was borrowed. He had no food, just a nearly full glass of red wine. But the most unsettling thing? He was staring at us, not casually, not in passing, unblinking, focused. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was just a lonely guy spending Valentine's alone. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But every time I looked up, his eyes were still on us, on Elena. She didn't notice at first. She was scrolling through the menu, debating between filet mignon and lobster risotto, but I wasn't paying attention to her. I was too busy watching him. The man never checked his phone, never glanced elsewhere. He just sat there, staring. A waiter passed by, and I seized the moment. "Hey," I muttered, keeping my voice low. "The guy in the black suit over there. Do you know if he's waiting for someone?" The waiter glanced over his shoulder, then back at me. "That guy?" He frowned. "He's been here for hours, ordered 1 glass of wine. Hasn't touched it." A chill ran through me. "For hours. Since before my shift started," the waiter added. "Is he bothering you?" I hesitated. I didn't want to make a scene. Elena still had no idea. "No," I said finally. "Just weird." The waiter nodded and walked off. I exhaled, trying to shake the feeling, but when I turned back, the man was gone. His chair sat empty, his wine glass still untouched. I rolled my shoulders, trying to shrug off the unease. Maybe I had been overthinking it. Maybe he'd just left. Elena finally noticed my distraction. "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Thought I saw someone I knew." She smiled. "Well, I'm getting the lobster risotto, obviously." I tried to focus on dinner, on Elena's laugh, on the warm ambiance of the restaurant. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. Then the waiter returned. He didn't bring food, didn't bring drinks. Instead, he slid a small folded napkin onto the table beside my plate. I frowned. "What's this?" He hesitated. "That man. He asked me to give it to you." I unfolded the napkin, pulse picking up as I read the words inside. "How much?" "Name your price." For a second, I didn't understand. Then, my stomach twisted. I looked up, scanning the restaurant. The man was nowhere near his table, but I spotted him, standing near the exit, waiting. I leaned closer to Elena. "We need to leave." "What? Why?" I stuffed the napkin into my pocket. "I don't like this place. Let's go." She frowned, confused, but didn't argue. I threw some cash on the table, grabbed my coat, and stood up. The moment we moved, he stepped forward, blocking our way. Imagine you're in this situation. Someone watches you all night, sends you a cryptic message, and then stands in your way. What would you do? Fight? Confront them? Run? Tell me in the comments. The man smiled, smooth, almost friendly. "Leaving already?" I positioned myself slightly in front of Elena. "Yeah, we are." "A shame," he said, his eyes drifting to her. I was hoping to make a business proposal. My fists clenched. "Not interested." His smirk widened. "Are you sure?" I didn't answer. I just grabbed Elena's hand and pushed past him. He didn't follow. But as we stepped onto the street, I felt his eyes on us. We walked fast, weaving through crowds of tourists and Valentine's couples. I didn't stop until we reached the parking lot, heart hammering. "Elena, get in the car. What the hell is going on?" she demanded. "Who was that guy?" I pulled out the napkin, handed it to her. She read it, her face drained of color. "What does this mean?" I shook my head. "I don't know, and I don't want to find out." I started the car, checking the rearview mirror. No sign of him. Still, I took different streets, making sure we weren't being followed. Only when we were miles away did I exhale. We never saw him again, but that note still haunts me. Not because of what it said, but because I'll never know what he was actually offering and what would have happened if I had given him an answer. Valentine's Day was never a big deal for me. I never cared for the overpriced dinners, the cheesy romance, or the predictable heart-shaped chocolates, but I did like the idea of doing something different. So when my boyfriend, Lucas, suggested a late-night walk through an old cemetery in Salem, I didn't immediately say no. "It's like gothic romance," he had said, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. I'd been dating Lucas for almost a year. At first, he was perfect, thoughtful, charming, intense in a way that made me feel wanted. But over time, that intensity started to feel more like possession. He didn't like when I went out without telling him. He questioned my male friends. He made me feel guilty for wanting space, and yet I always convinced myself it wasn't that bad. That night, he picked me up at 10 p.m. The streets of Salem were deserted, the shops long closed. The cemetery's iron gate was slightly ajar, never truly locked. Tourists sneaked in all the time. Lucas walked ahead, weaving through the gravestones. The fog curled around our ankles, making the headstones look like they were floating. I tried to play along, tried to find the charm in this eerie setting. But the deeper we went, the heavier the silence became. And then I saw it, a bouquet of fresh red roses neatly placed on a grave. At first I thought it was sweet, someone mourning a lost love, until I saw the note, a plain white envelope, slightly damp from the mist, and on the front, in bold black ink, my name. Imagine this, you find your name on a grave, written on a note. Would you open it, or would you run? Tell me in the comments, what would you do? My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, in careful, neat handwriting, were just 6 words. "So you'll never leave me, ever." A chill ran down my spine. My heart pounded so loudly I swore it echoed through the cemetery. I turned to Lucas, my breath caught in my throat. "Lucas, what the hell is this?" He was watching me, not shocked, not confused, just watching. Then he smirked. "You like it? Like it?" The letter trembled in my hands. "Is this a joke?" He shrugged. "It's poetic, don't you think? Love that lasts forever, even beyond death." My stomach twisted. This wasn't love. This was obsession. "This isn't romantic, Lucas. It's terrifying." His face darkened, his jaw clenched. And then in a low voice he muttered, "Why?" "Because I don't want to lose you." That's when I realized just how deep his obsession ran. "Let's go," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "This isn't funny." I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, his hand wrapped around my wrist. Not hard, but firm. "You always ruin things," he said, his grip tightening. "I do something meaningful, and you don't even appreciate it." I yanked my arm away, stepping back. "You left a note on a grave with my name on it. How did you expect me to react? This is sick, Lucas." His eyes flickered with something unreadable. For a moment I thought he might do something, might try to stop me. Then just as quickly, his expression shifted. He exhaled, smiled. "Fine," he said, his voice light. "Let's go." We walked back in silence. Every step I kept him in my peripheral vision. My instincts screamed at me to get away, but I forced myself to act normal. I didn't want to set him off. Not here, not yet. When we reached the gate, I let out a slow breath. "I'll take you home," Lucas said. No, I answered, keeping my voice firm. I'll get an Uber. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger? Amusement? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're overreacting. I ignored him. Pulled out my phone, called for a ride, refused to look up until I saw the headlights approaching. Only then did I take a step back. Lucas watched me get into the car. His face was calm, composed, like nothing had happened. See you soon, he murmured. I shut the door. Didn't look back. That night I didn't go home. I went straight to my friend Audrey's apartment, shaking as I told her everything. She listened, horror growing on her face. You need to block him, now. So I did. Blocked his number, his social media, told my friends, my co-workers. I was done, but Lucas wasn't. The next few days were a nightmare. He showed up at my apartment, knocked for hours, left voicemails, long messages about how I was making a mistake. Then the texts started. Different numbers, different accounts. You can't just disappear. We were meant to be. You know I won't stop. The final straw. Audrey called me from work, her voice shaking. He came here. He asked where you were. That night I went to the police, filed for a restraining order, and just like that, he vanished. No more calls, no more knocks, no more messages. He was just gone. For a while I kept For a while I kept waiting. For a glimpse of him in a crowd, for a shadow outside my window. But nothing ever came. Years passed. Life moved on. But even now, no matter how much time has gone by, I still wonder, is he waiting? This story is every person's worst nightmare. But here's the real question. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have confronted him sooner, fled earlier? Tell me in the comments. I want to know how you would have escaped. And if you're watching this alone at night, maybe check your phone. Because some obsessions never die. Valentine's Day is supposed to be about love, right? A special night with someone you care about. But for me and my boyfriend, it turned into a nightmare, a story we'll never forget. And after hearing this, neither will you. This happened 4 years ago. My boyfriend and I had planned a cute dinner, just like any other couple. As we walked up to the restaurant, I noticed something off. A couple sitting outside, staring at us. Not just a casual glance. Number. Their eyes locked on to us, unblinking. I nudged my boyfriend, signaling him to look, but he shrugged it off. We stepped inside, gave his name to the hostess, and were told it would be a 45-minute wait. So we decided to kill time at the mini-golf course across the street. As we walked back to his car, the woman from the couple suddenly stood up, raised her hand, and smiled. Hi there, I'm Mrs. Gretty. Something about her made my stomach twist. Her smile was too wide, too forced. I looked at my boyfriend. He seemed uneasy too. She held her hand out, waiting. I didn't want to be rude, so I shook it. Her grip was ice cold. My husband and I are photographers, she said. You two are such a great-looking couple. We'd love to take some photos of you. Our studio is just 5 minutes away. We can even drive you there. No business card, no proof. Just an invitation to follow two complete strangers to a place we'd never heard of. Red flags everywhere. My boyfriend politely declined, saying we had plans. Mrs. Gretty's smile twitched and she sat back down next to her silent husband. But as we walked away, I felt her eyes still on us. We tried to shake off the creepy encounter and headed to mini-golf. Oddly, the place was completely empty. No staff, no customers, just us. We started playing, laughing about the weird couple, but deep down, something still felt wrong. Then, the entrance bell rang. I turned, and my blood ran cold. It was them. Mrs. Gretty and her husband stood by the door, scanning the place. Then, she saw me, and she smiled, the same twisted, unnatural smile. I whispered to my boyfriend. He turned, saw them, and instantly tensed up. Why were they here? We decided to leave. As we turned around, they were right behind us, Crazy how we both came to the same spot. Mrs. Greddy cooed. Then for the first time, the husband spoke. We should face each other. Greddy versus Rod. My boyfriend froze. Rod, his last name. How did they know? We mumbled an excuse and rushed out. We didn't stop until we were safely inside his car. My hands were shaking. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. But the night wasn't over yet. All right, pause for a second. What would you do in this situation? A couple you don't know, somehow knowing your last name, following you to a completely different location. Do you, A, confront them and demand answers? B, call the police immediately? C, get the hell out of there, no questions asked? Tell me in the comments. Because what happens next gets even worse. We waited in the car until our restaurant table was ready. My boyfriend tried to calm me down, but my mind kept replaying that moment. Rod, they knew his name. Dinner was supposed to help us relax, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. At one point, I swear I saw Mrs. Greddy peeking from around the corner, but when I blinked, she was gone. After dinner, we started driving to my boyfriend's house. To get there, we had to take a long, dark road, surrounded by trees, no streetlights, no traffic, just us, and whatever was out there. Then I noticed it, a car following us. I told my boyfriend, and he quickly pulled into a CVS parking lot. We waited, holding our breath. The car was gone. Relieved, we got back on the road. But 3 minutes later, bang, the car jerked. My boyfriend hit the brakes. His 2 front tires had popped. That's when it clicked. This wasn't an accident. He turned to me, eyes wide. Get out, now! I didn't question him. I just ran. He killed the engine, turned off the lights, and grabbed my hand. We bolted into the woods. Lying flat against the ground, we heard it. A car pulling up, a door opening, then her voice. You took too long. We stayed hidden until the police arrived. Told them everything, but nothing ever came of it. No leads, no suspects. To this day, we still don't know who they were or what they wanted, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder, what if we had said yes? They say Valentine's Day is about love, romance, and making memories. But for me, Valentine's Day 2016 became a night I'll never forget, because I almost came face to face with something far more terrifying than heartbreak. Let me take you back to that night. It was a chilly Valentine's evening, and I had just finished a nice dinner with my girlfriend. As usual, we decided to take a late-night walk along the beach. There was something peaceful about the sound of the waves, the salty breeze, and the way the world seemed to slow down. But that night, something felt off. Instead of going to the busy areas near the pier or lighthouse, I drove us to a secluded parking lot, one that people rarely used. I thought it would be perfect for some privacy. The lot was lower than the road, hidden behind a small slope. I backed into a spot so we were facing the road, giving us a clear view of any cars coming our way. We sat there for a while, playing music and sharing scary stories I had found online. The air was calm, the night was peaceful, until it wasn't. About 30 minutes in, I noticed a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. A truck. At first, I didn't think much of it. People often sped down that road since there weren't any police around. But this one felt different. It wasn't just speeding, it was racing. The headlights grew brighter, approaching at an alarming speed. My stomach twisted when I realized it wasn't slowing down. The truck hit the slope leading into the parking lot so fast that its front wheels actually lifted off the ground for a moment. My instincts kicked in. "Duck down," I whispered to my girlfriend. She didn't ask why. She just did it. I kept my head low, heart pounding, while my fingers curled around my keys, ready to start the engine in case we needed to get out fast. I didn't know who was in that truck, but I'd seen enough horror movies to know that hiding was better than being seen. And then the truck slammed to a stop, but not in front of us. It screeched to a halt about 50 yards away, near where the pavement met the sand. But something was wrong. It hadn't parked normally. It had stopped at a strange angle, like whoever was driving didn't even care. Then the doors swung open, and 3 men jumped out. Now, before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Imagine you're in my position, sitting in a dark, isolated parking lot, watching 3 men jump out of a speeding truck. You have no idea who they are, what they want, or why they're here. A. Stay completely hidden and wait it out. B. Start your car and leave immediately. C. Try to get a closer look to see what's going on. Drop your answer in the comments. I want to see how many of you think the way I did that night. All right, back to the story. The 3 men bolted toward the water. Not just walking or jogging, running, fast, and they were shouting. Their voices were lost up in the crashing waves, but I could hear panic, urgency, like they were trying to get rid of something. Then silence. For a moment, nothing moved. No voices, no footsteps. Just the distant hum of the truck's engine still running. My girlfriend let out a shaky breath. "What are they doing?" she whispered. I had no answer, but something in my gut told me whatever they had just done, whatever they had run to the water for, it wasn't good. 3 minutes later, the men reappeared. They sprinted back to the truck, jumped in without hesitation, and sped away, gone. Not a glance in our direction, not a pause to catch their breath, just a hasty escape, like they had just gotten rid of something. That was it. I didn't care anymore. I turned on my car, backed out, and left the lot as fast as I could. The next morning at work, I told a coworker about what happened. She pulled out her phone, casually searching for any news from the beach that night. And then she found it, an article. A man had been attacked near the pier around 9:15 p.m. The details matched perfectly. The time, the location, everything. The attackers had fled immediately after the assault. And the worst part? The suspects' descriptions sounded eerily similar to the men I had seen. I didn't call the police. I couldn't. I had no real details, no clear description of their faces, no memory of the truck's make or model, and in that darkness, not even the color. But I knew what they had been doing at the beach. They hadn't just washed off evidence. They had washed off blood. To this day, I still wonder if I hadn't ducked down. If they had seen us, would we have become their next victims? Or worse, would we have seen something we weren't supposed to see? Let me know in the comments. What do you think those men were doing? And remember, if you ever find yourself in a dark, empty parking lot and a speeding truck pulls not get out, imagine having someone watch you every day, every shift. No matter when or where you worked, they were just there, staring, waiting, and then one night, they follow you into the dark. When I was 20, I moved to San Antonio, Texas, to live with my uncle. We had an agreement, no rent, as long as I helped out around the house and looked after my younger cousins. It worked out well, especially since I had just landed a job at a well-known coffee shop downtown, right in the middle of the busy tourist district. At first, everything was great. I made friends with my coworkers, and work became my second home. But one day, something changed. That morning, 3 men sat in the shop for hours. They didn't order anything. They just sat there, watching people come and go. That wasn't unusual for our location, so I didn't think much of it. Later, during my break, I decided to walk to a nearby store to buy a farewell card for a coworker. As I stepped outside, I put in my earphones, but before I could press play, I heard the door open behind me. Footsteps. Someone was following me. I glanced sideways and my stomach dropped. It was one of the men from the shop. He quickly caught up, walking beside me, matching my pace. "Hey, what's your number?" he asked casually, as if we were old friends. I forced a polite smile and said, "Sorry, not interested." But he didn't take no for an answer. He kept pushing, his voice turning more insistent. Annoyed, I finally snapped, "Leave me alone." He stopped dead in his tracks, staring at me like I had just broken some unspoken rule. Maybe he wasn't used to rejection. Maybe he expected me to just go along with it. Either way, I walked away, thinking that was the end of it. I was wrong. He was always there. From that day forward, he started showing up. Every single shift. Sometimes he was already there when I arrived. Other times, he walked in a few minutes after I did. He never ordered anything. He just sat there, watching. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. But then I noticed something disturbing. My work schedule wasn't consistent. Some days I opened. Some days I closed. Other times I worked midday shifts. But no matter when I worked, he was always there. He never spoke to me, never followed me home. He just stared. My coworkers started noticing too. They tried blocking his view, sending me to the back, making sure I never walked to my car alone. But nothing made him go away. Then one night, everything escalated. Imagine you're in this situation. Someone keeps showing up at your workplace, never talking, never leaving, just watching you. You know something is off, but technically, they haven't done anything illegal. What would you do? Call the police? Confront them? Try to ignore it? Let me know in the comments what your first move would be. Because trust me, what happened next was worse than I ever imagined. One night I was working a closing shift. My manager and 2 coworkers were there. At one point I needed to use the bathroom, so I let them know I'd be right back. The restrooms were tucked away in a small hallway, out of sight from the main area. As I passed through the lobby, I saw him sitting there. He was alone this time. I stepped into the restroom and locked the door, but as soon as I sat down, rattle, the doorknob shook violently. I froze. Someone was trying to get in. I cleared my throat and called out, "Occupied." Silence then. "Rattle, rattle, rattle." Harder this time. I shouted. I said, "It's occupied." Silence again. My pulse pounded in my ears. I waited. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe someone was just impatient. But when I finally opened the door, the hallway was empty. Except, as I walked back to the counter, I saw him, sliding back into his chair, adjusting his posture, as if he had just run back there before I saw him. I felt sick. I told my boss, but he said there wasn't much we could do. We had no proof it was him. I knew I had to get out of there. Then came the night of Valentine's Day. It was a Thursday, and I was working late with my team leader, Hannah. We had to deep clean the store, which meant staying until 1 a.m. I was cleaning the bathrooms when it happened. As I stepped out, I felt something. That eerie, skin-crawling sensation of being watched. I turned toward the front of the store, toward the giant glass windows, and my breath caught in my throat. He was there, pressed against the glass, both hands flat against the window, his eyes wide, unblinking. And on his palm, stuck to the glass, was a purple foam heart. I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. He just stared at me. I stumbled back into the bathroom, heart hammering. "Hannah, he's here. He's watching me." Double asterisk. She rushed over, saw him, and immediately started shouting, "You need to leave. We're calling the police." He didn't move, didn't blink. For 5 long minutes, he just stood there, watching. Then, finally, he turned and walked away. The next morning, I had had enough. I told my manager I was filing a police report, whether he liked it or not. I called *911*. 2 officers arrived at my house, took my statement, and assured me I had done the right thing. And after that, he never came back to the coffee shop. Months later, I finally felt safe enough to go downtown again with friends. But as we turned a corner, I saw him. I didn't think. I ducked into a store as my friends followed. I never saw him again after that. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, he's still watching, waiting. And next time, I might not be so lucky. If you ever get the feeling that someone is watching you, trust your instincts. Don't wait until it's too late. And if you were in my shoes, what would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments. What if the person you trust the most isn't who you think they are? You know that feeling when you're being watched? That eerie sensation that crawls up your spine, making your skin prickle? Yeah, I ignored it for too long, and I shouldn't have. I had a close friend. Her name was Eleanor. We met in year 10 and became inseparable. She had just moved from Sydney with her older sister due to family issues. They had no permanent home, just a small room in a short-term housing facility. She never talked much about her past, but I knew it had been rough. My life wasn't much better at the time. I was crashing on my ex's couch. Despite having almost nothing, Eleanor let me stay with her, splitting her already tiny bed. That's just the kind of person she was. Selfless, kind. Eventually, I patched things up with my parents and moved back home. But Eleanor and I remained close, so close that when her sister moved in with her boyfriend, I invited Eleanor to live with me. She became my roommate and we still shared a bed. It wasn't weird. It was just normal for us. At least it was. Things were good for a while. I had been in a relationship for years before meeting Eleanor, but we lived separately. She never really had to deal with him. But then something changed. 2 years into our friendship, we both found ourselves drawn to the same guy. But he liked me, not her. I thought this might cause tension, but Eleanor insisted she was happy for me. She even encouraged me to go for it. I believed her, but maybe I shouldn't have. I started spending more time at his place. But on the nights he stayed over at ours, Eleanor would sleep in the spare room without a fuss. In fact, she seemed more attached to me than ever, so much so that she even gave me a ring on Valentine's Day. That should have been my first clue. Then came the night that still haunts me. But before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and felt like someone was watching you? Maybe you even saw something in the darkness, but convinced yourself it was just a shadow. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a night like that? It was around 2 a.m. My partner and I were fast asleep. The room was pitch black, so dark I couldn't even see my own hand in front of me. Then I woke up. I don't know why. No noise, no movement. Just an overwhelming, suffocating feeling that I had to open my eyes. And when I did, I saw something, a shadow, a figure standing by the bed. At first I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but my gut screamed otherwise. Slowly I reached for my partner's arm and whispered, "I think someone's in the room." His eyes snapped open. In a split second, I flicked on the light, expecting, hoping that nothing would be there. But no. Eleanor stood by the bed, silent, still, watching. We jolted upright, our hearts hammering. My partner was ready to fight, but Eleanor didn't react. She just blinked and said, in the calmest voice, "I forgot something." And then she walked out. She didn't take anything, didn't even look around. She had been standing there in the dark, watching us sleep. That night, we barely slept. Not because we were afraid of the dark, but because we were afraid of her. The next morning, we confronted her, but she was distant, almost like she wasn't even there anymore. She avoided me, stayed around other people, and then suddenly, she was gone. Less than 2 weeks later, she moved in with her sister. She cut off all contact. I had to send her stuff to a relative because I couldn't reach her. 5 years later, my partner and I are still together, and we still get chills talking about that night. Because sometimes I wonder, how long had she been standing there before I woke up, and what would have happened if I hadn't woken up at all? Imagine being alone in a quiet hotel hallway late at night and realizing someone is watching you, following you, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This happened when I was just 13 years old. My family and I were on vacation in Cancun. Me, my parents, my brother and my cousins, along with their parents. It was supposed to be a fun, relaxing trip. During the day, we did our own activities, but every evening we all had dinner together at the resort. That night, the adults stayed at the buffet, laughing and chatting, while we kids decided to hang out by the pool. It was Valentine's Day, and someone had given us candy earlier. I left mine in the hotel room, not thinking much of it. After a while, two of my cousins wanted to go back to their room to grab their candy, and I figured I'd join them. Their room was right next to ours, on the same floor. Easy, right? We walked through the silent, dimly lit hallway. The carpet absorbed our footsteps, and the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Nothing seemed unusual at first. One of my cousins needed to use the bathroom, so I waited outside in the hallway alone. And that's when I noticed him. A man. Tall, or at least he seemed tall to my 13-year-old self. He was bald, maybe had some facial hair, but I couldn't tell for sure. He wore a gold and white shirt, one that looked oddly familiar, like something my dad owned from an old band, the Eagles, and he was pacing, back and forth, up and down the long, empty hallway. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was just stretching his legs or waiting for someone. But on his third lap past me, he did something that made my stomach tighten. He said, "Hi," not in a friendly way, not like a guest casually greeting another. There was something off about it. I nodded back, forcing myself to act normal, but my instincts told me, something's wrong. By his fourth lap, I noticed he was holding a drink. A beer, maybe. He wasn't just walking, he was watching. I swiped my key card and stepped inside my hotel room. The door creaked open, and just as I turned to shut it, he was standing right behind me. Imagine this. You're in a hotel room, alone. You turn around, and a complete stranger is suddenly inches away from you. What would you do? Would you scream? Would you run? Or would you freeze? Tell me in the comments. What's your first move in a situation like this? My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. He wasn't fully inside the room, but he was close enough. If I shut the door now, I'd be trapped with him. I swallowed my fear and asked in the steadiest voice I could manage, "What are you doing?" He just stared at me. No words, no expression, just an empty, soulless gaze. I had seconds to react. I shoved the door as hard as I could. The second I pushed, he pushed back. Neither of us spoke. No shouting, no struggling, just silent, terrifying pressure as we fought over the door. I threw my full weight against it. Click! The door lock engaged. For a moment I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stood there, heart racing, my back pressed against the door, making sure he couldn't get in. Then shaking, I grabbed my phone and called my mom. I wanted to scream, cry, do something, but I forced myself to stay calm. Meanwhile, my cousins, who had no idea what just happened, came out of their room and assumed I'd gone downstairs to wait for them. But I wasn't downstairs. I was inside, trapped, waiting for my family to come back. 15 minutes later, my parents and hotel security arrived, and they found him. The man was still on our floor. He hadn't run. He hadn't left. He was waiting. Security confronted him, but something was wrong. They quickly discovered that he had stolen a walkie-talkie from the hotel's staff. But why? And then, my dad. He walked straight up to the man, looked him in the eye and asked one chilling question. "Did you go into my child's room?" The man didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, silent. My dad's expression darkened. Without saying another word, he turned to security and told them, "Take care of it." And they did. The man was escorted out of the building, and my parents stayed by my side for the rest of the trip. To this day, I still wonder, what would have happened if I had hesitated for just a moment longer? If I had frozen instead of shutting that door? I don't even want to think about it. So, what do you think he wanted? Was he just drunk, or was he planning something far worse? And why did he steal the security walkie-talkie? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And remember, trust your instincts, because sometimes the real monsters don't hide under the bed. They walk among us.